The F1 show is brought to you by Stop Drop Gaming's Tournament section, racing classic 80s F1 2013, F1 2014, and soon to be launched touring car series on Forza 6. Check out www.stopdropgaming.com for details. Hello and welcome to the F1 show over at stopdropgaming.com. I'm Stephen J. Hayes hosting tonight, and I'm joined by Callum.
Hello.
And Kris. How are we doing?
Hello, very good, thank you.
So the Japanese Grand Prix was a bit of a bore for some people, and limited TV time for the race winner and the Ferrari team. Guys, what did you think when you saw a lack of TV time for the Ferrari and Mercedes team? Kris?
I mean, I think the lack for Mercedes was probably because they were at the front and they couldn't really do much. I think the only significant TV time they got was obviously at the first corner. As for Ferrari, I think they were just following Mercedes, so there wasn't much action going between the four drivers, split between the two teams. So I don't know, I kind of enjoyed watching other teams battle as opposed to just watching the same two teams every single week.
I think it was a little bit different to when in like Bahrain 2012 in practice, where we didn't see the Force India at all because of an incident that had happened the day before. I think it was more of the fact that we saw the Mercedes at the start, we saw Rosberg go back through the field, and then there was nothing else to watch. So, let's watch the battle for 12th place instead.
And what a battle it was. So do you think there's any weight behind the story that Beirne Eccleston deliberately tweaked down the amount of TV time because of the struggles that the Red Bull team are going on at the moment? Of course, Red Bull's threatening to pull out because they no longer have an engine, having separated ties with the Renault team. What do you think about that, Callum?
I wouldn't read too much into it, to be honest. Apparently, Beirne had, for what happened at Monza in Singapore, Mercedes had soft and medium compound tyres just rebranded to look like the super soft and the soft, just as punishment. I wouldn't read too much into it. As for Red Bull, as a Red Bull fan, I don't want them to pull out. I don't think they will. I think Ferrari will be pushed into a corner, but I still think Mercedes should have given them an engine, and I'm very disappointed that they didn't.
And Kris, would you like to have seen Mercedes power the Red Bull and the Toro Rosso team next season?
I believe I think how far the Mercedes was gone when they actually accepted Red Bull to take the engines, but obviously Red Bull just didn't get back to them on that. I think it's going to end up going to Ferrari, but they're going to have to resort to the 2015 engine, which is what Ferrari actually proposing them now. I wouldn't really mind to see a Red Bull with a Mercedes engine. It'd be it'd be better for the championship and obviously the sport, because that means the Red Bull would literally be on par with the Mercedes. But being like a Ferrari fan, I kind of don't want them to have the worst engine on the grid. Give them a Honda engine and we'll be sorted.
One thing I would add is that one of the reasons that Mercedes didn't give Red Bull an engine is because of the way Red Bull dealt with their divorce with Renault. They went about it the entire wrong way and kind of humiliated Renault in a way. And Mercedes don't want the same sort of thing to happen. If that makes sense.
Do you think they've made their bed and now they're lying in it, as it were?
Yeah. Red Bull have put themselves into a corner where, why would you want to supply a team that that has won 4 world championships with Renault, and then after a couple of dodgy seasons just dumps them publicly? You'd think twice before picking them up as an engine supplier.
Well, reportedly, it would cost £330 million to Red Bull for them to pull out of the sport. But when you think about the amount of money that they must sink into development, etc., surely that's just a flash in the pan, isn't it? It's not a lot of money to spend in comparison to what they will spend to remain in the sport. Kris, with that in mind, then, do you think that they seriously are going to pull out?
I mean, I think it's the last 3 seasons now. Red Bull have threatened to obviously pull out of the sport for this reason, then obviously next season it's a different reason, and again this year it's to do with engines as opposed to anything else. It's just, I think it gets to a point where the threats will keep happening, and then when they eventually do quit, I don't think anyone will really believe them. It's kind of like a boy who cried wolf in a sense, because they keep threatening it, and to what point will they actually just, we're done here? But where realistically could they go? Because fair enough, they have parts in other sports like motorsport and everything else more or less is sponsored by Red Bull, but how would they go about it? Like, who would fill their slot on the grid?
Well, there was talk about VW coming into the sport before their current troubles. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a few dodgy engine emission settings that have been put on a few cars, and now they look like they may have to pay a fine of £12 billion. So that's actually going to threaten a lot of their motorsport. The thing is, though, is it was discussed that they take Ferrari for a couple of seasons and then move across when they developed an engine. But why would Ferrari put themselves through that of giving them an engine, letting them leech all the information off of that, and then giving VW an idea of how to build an engine? Doesn't make sense to me personally. But anyway, moving on. So in other news, Max Verstappen passed his driver's test and no one outside of Holland actually cared.
I was born in Belgium.
So he's a false Dutchman. So Grosjean has gone to Haas. We all said he wouldn't do it, apart from Callum. Callum called it. Do you want to gloat, Callum?
I know it's kind of like a radio show, but I had a very smug face once that was announced yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. I remember at the Italian Grand Prix F1 show, you and Stuart mocked me, thought he won't go to Haas. I said he would go to Haas. So I called it. I'm happy. I have credibility still.
So we kind of mentioned it before we started recording, but so this Haas team then is going to be essentially a Ferrari B team. Kris, how do you feel about the possibility of essentially a customer car now in the sport?
I mean, that's one thing that's obviously looked down upon by the entire grid, and obviously the head of Formula One, they don't want anything like that. But the way Haas have gone around it by using Ferrari's wind tunnel manufacturing, they could even manufacture like the brake ducts because there's obviously holes in the regulation. So it's definitely a very intelligent way to join Formula One, which I think is obviously the goal, is to do it as cost effectively as possible. Having a Ferrari engine as well will help. Also being given a driver, like potential test driver by Ferrari as their second driver in the form of Esteban Gutierrez. So I mean, I don't mind it if it does turn into a Ferrari B team where they have to move out the way for obviously the main drivers. I don't think it'll be that. I think it'll be kind of like Red Bull Toro Rosso. They are essentially a customer car B team, but they're their own independent team at the same time.
I think it's a smart move, especially with the fact that 2017 you got the big rule changes. So it'd be kind of pointless to develop a brand new car for 2016 only to replace it for an extremely brand new car in 17.
So you think that the Haas team are going to be the sort of development sort of side for Ferrari? See if it works. If it works, they bring it onto their car. If it doesn't, it gets put aside and something else is trialed.
Yeah, a little bit like what's going to happen to Manor, because they're going to get a Mercedes engine now, and Pascal Wehrlein is one of their drivers. So that Mercedes will be testing out their new bits on Manor before they stick it on the works car.
Well, has that been confirmed yet?
Not yet. I'm calling it again.
Oh, you're calling the next one, are you?
Yes.
You heard it here first. Well, if you're listening. Anyway.
How I see it is it's kind of, so if you look at it, Red Bull's got a B team, Ferrari will now essentially have a B team, and in the form of Manor, if you read between the lines and the way it's going, like you said, they'll be testing out obviously Mercedes parts for putting on the works car. That could possibly fall into suit of also being a B team, and if you look at it like that, it looks like it's going to end up going to customer cars. Mercedes having basically 4 cars on the grid by the same team, albeit different names and stuff like that. But it's a weird predicament to be put in.
I think customer cars is the way forward, because if we do lose Red Bull and Toro Rosso, what would we fall down to? What is it? Would we fall down to 18 cars on the grid? And we don't want that. And we'd start talking about 3-car teams again, which I wouldn't be opposed to, but I don't think it's the way to go really.
Okay, so with Grosjean going to Haas, that's now leaving a space over at Lotus/Renault when they decide to buy them. And obviously they've re-signed Pastor Maldonado, much to the greatest sigh of every single F1 fan out there and the despair of them. But who's going to actually take that second seat in that future Renault team? Kris?
It could be, realistically, it could actually be anyone at this point. Obviously, they've got a little bit towards the end of the season, I think. But I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, I would not be surprised if they have like a reserve or third driver brought up by them or someone else on the grid to give them experience, brought them in for a year, and if they re-sign Kimi Räikkönen and is in 2017 when his contract ends with Ferrari, that wouldn't surprise me that much, because obviously they enjoyed having him there. And maybe if it's a seat, and if they got Mercedes power, maybe with him they can get back on the horse a little bit.
I think when Kimi retires, he said he wants to retire at Ferrari. In terms of the Renault, the Lotus Renault seat, possible if it's when they're bought by Renault, Jean-Eric Vergne looks like a good bet, but I think he'll end up at Haas by the looks of it. So there's rumours of possibly Magnussen, Jolyon Palmer, but if you're going with the kind of French sort of connection, if Jenson Button stays, don't be surprised to see Stoffel Van Dorn in that car.
Do you really think Stoffel Van Dorn in the car? He's Belgium, isn't he?
Well, he's going to win the GP2 championship, which means that if he can't get a seat in F1, he can't race in GP2 next year. So he needs to get a seat. And I think he would cut ties with Honda and McLaren to get a seat at that Renault team. And France, Belgium, if you're not going to get Jean-Eric Vergne, you probably don't want Charles Pic. It's probably your closest thing to a French driver in a French team.
What about Gasly?
He's part of that Red Bull Junior program, so no.
I'll tell you what, I'd be intrigued to see where Kevin Magnussen actually ends up at the end of this year. Maybe, obviously, with the seats opening up, he could fill the McLaren spot, or he could fill the Lotus. Who knows? He might even fill Haas. We don't know.
After the Haas seat.
It's like there's so many drivers that are in the market that are actually underrated talents. Obviously, they picked up Grosjean, who I think was obviously a great buy for that, potential. But I think Magnussen should be the next one that should be picked up.
What I would say is it would be travesty. But bearing in mind, you've got people like Vergne, Magnussen, Van Dorn, around in the market. If Haas give Gutierrez that seat,
that could end up just coming down to the influence that Ferrari has. I mean, I think one thing that's interesting about that is that if Red Bull go to Ferrari for engines, they were going to supply them with 2015 engines, which is obviously what they're running now. No updates, blah, blah, blah. But obviously Haas, they're Ferrari, so they're going to get the 2016 spec engine. So in theory, Haas, whether it be a really good car or a back marker, it will have a better engine than the Red Bull. And I think that's really out of order on a Red Bull's part.
And what if Manor get the Mercedes engine? McLaren Honda will be looking over their shoulder, won't they?
Well, I called that one, didn't I?
You did call that one.
Yes. Now my time to gloat.
Where was I when we was calling these things, man?
Italian Grand Prix show, wasn't it?
Oh dear, indeed. So if we're talking about Honda, Mr. Dennis was being very defensive at the Japanese Grand Prix at the end when being interviewed by all the media outlets, and saying that yes, we have contracts in place for both Fernando and for Jenson. Slightly embarrassing that both the drivers then come out and said, we didn't say that. Isn't this sort of back to the old days where Ron's trying to play the old poker game as such? And I think several media outlets have said that Ron's playing the poker game and losing. Would you agree with that, Kris?
I'd agree that he's putting on a brave face, because right now he's in a position where he's got nothing to stand on right now. If two of the most experienced drivers on the grid are saying, we kind of don't want to be here, you haven't given us what you said you would, that being a fast car. I think there's a chance that Fernando Alonso could move, although that's a very small chance. There's a possibility. Obviously, there's the high chance that Jenson could over retire or obviously go to a different team. That's all up in the air at the moment. But I do reckon that he is in very deep water trying to put on a brave face, but his poker face it's not working.
If Alonso leaves, there's only one place he would go, and that's to WEC with Porsche and Mark Webber. To make this a little bit more interesting, the calendar for next year has been announced today, and Le Mans 24 Hour clashes with the F1 calendar for the first time. So Hülkenberg cannot defend his title, and it might just persuade Fernando Alonso to go into WEC.
See, I'm surprised no one called Fernando Alonso to Renault for next season.
That's what I was about to say. That
it's too risky. Too risky.
But look at the great partnership he had for many, many years. Obviously, it resulted in 2 World Championships. Maybe the second time around when he went back to them in 2007 and 8 and 9, I believe. He didn't do so good, but I reckon they could do it.
08-09 disaster, especially 09.
So on the subject of McLaren, did you all realise that they've got a sponsor today? They've signed a sponsor.
Yes, they have. I don't know who they are or what they do, but yeah, they become a sponsor. It's not even on the side pods though.
It's not. They've not even spent that amount of money. It's called Chandon, and let's see what it says here. Chandon, according to the McLaren press release, are a vibrant, sparkling wine with a boundless, conquering spirit. So we're now promoting drink driving. Is that right, Ron?
Well, hang on. They've got Johnny Walker whiskey and now sparkling wine.
Yeah.
You've got Smirnoff and Kingfisher on the Force India. You've got Martini all over the Williams.
I'm just waiting for McLaren's next sponsor announcement, White Lightning.
I think speaking on what you said about the calendar, it actually looks rather interesting. Actually, obviously there's a few changes. We've got Europe's come back and with an Azerbaijan circuit, and also Malaysia's been moved back towards obviously the back end of the season, so that fits in with the Asian tracks. So obviously a few tracks obviously moving forward a little bit. I think that's going to be rather interesting actually with the new Azerbaijan circuit.
Malaysia wanted to be the penultimate race of the year, but Beirne hasn't given it to them. They've put Malaysia after Singapore. But the good news, guys, is that we've got Sochi next week, and then we've got it just a few months later.
Yeah, May the 1st is Sochi after it is this Sunday.
I'm glad the British Grand Prix has been pushed back to 10th of July. That means I can now go and book my weekend tickets.
That's back where it should be. It's around by my birthday. That's where it should have always been.
I think they said 7 back-to-back races with obviously not in a row, but like 7 races of the season are actually back-to-back with another race, which I think is going to be kind of handy because that breaks every now and again starting to get a bit boring, especially with this 2-week break.
They've shortened the summer break as well. I think because I believe it's 22 races 22 races on the calendar, which will make it the longest calendar in Formula One history. They need to have more back-to-back weekends.
So if we come back to Sochi then, what are our predictions for Sochi? Callum, who's going to win it?
Lewis.
And what else are your predictions for that GP?
Williams went well there last year, so they could be strong again. There's a couple of long straights on there, so it's obviously going to aid. It could aid the Williams. They could jump ahead of the Ferrari. Hopefully, Ferrari can get in the mix up front. Hopefully, Williams can as well. Lewis went well there last year. So did Bottas, actually. So I think Lewis will kind of walk it. He's just in that sweet spot at the moment. And if he wins it, I think you can safely write Nico Rosberg out the title then.
And Kris?
I reckon that this is going to be the start of Rosberg's charge back to the title race. And I've got a feeling he's going to be really strong, and he's actually going to. He may not take pole. He won't take pole. Lewis will, but he'll win the race. That's just my prediction. As far as everyone else goes, I reckon Hamilton will finish third and Vettel will finish second.
Blimey.
Well, I think we all go down to the bookies and put a $5 on that then, don't we?
I would be very surprised if that happened. Unless there was a car issue, I can't see that happening.
This is going to be what I'm calling for the race. So after Sochi, I could be like, yeah, I called it. Because I need to get on the board with that.
I'm also predicting Alexander Rossi and Will Stevens to score points.
I mean, realistically, if you look at it, it's not exactly that blasé. Like, it's well possible. I mean, what has got to happen is, for example, Lewis to get a puncture, and then that's it.
Yeah. I mean, if there's an issue, if Lewis gets an issue, yeah, that's definitely on the cards. Yeah.
What I'll do, I'll find a place to put a bet on it, and I'll put a bet on it. I'll put a £5 bet on it, and if it happens, I'm gonna be happy bunny.
I'm going to wait for you to donate all that profit to the forum.
The
silence is deafening.
Yeah, I think if you win that, I'll be like, my precious. My money.
I mean, I could have gone even worse and said that Kimi was going to win a race. So I mean, that's probably going over the handlebars.
So that's all we've got time for tonight. You've been listening to the F1 show from StopDropGaming.com, where we run competitive leagues on Assetto Corsa for the PC, F1 2013 and 14 on Xbox 360, F1 2015 on Xbox One, and soon to be launched Touring Car Championship on Forza 6. A special thanks to my guests Kris and Callum, and we will see you next time for the Russian GP review. Good night.
Bye.
Good night. The apple of my eye.
Oh, you're so cute.
I'll headbutt you through my laptop.